the example I give is one of these teachers who was famous for we'll just play games with them. He would do things like a bingo game that lasted 45 minutes. I saw that, and I saw a lot of the untrained teachers doing it this way, and they were looking at like, oh, well, we'll just play a game, and it's like, well, it has to go somewhere.
Welcome back to Inside Japan. I'm Charlie, and in this episode I speak with my friend Quint, a professor at the University of Waseda. He teaches the Teachers of English in Japan, and we go into why Japanese students often abandon learning English. What do many teachers, even trained teachers, get wrong about language learning? This is one for the passionate teachers out there and those who want to know that there are talented and smart people working on the problem of demotivated English language learners in Japan, and that progress is being made little by little. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi, Quint. Thank you so much for coming on Inside Japan.
Thank you very much for having me, Charlie. It's really good to be here. Honored to be able to talk to you on hopefully what I have to say is interesting to your listeners.
I'm sure it will be. So first, just tell me a little bit about your background, like coming to Japan, and how you went from teaching eikaiwa to now working at a university with some really interesting teaching programs.
Okay. So I first came to Japan without a real plan, just trying to, get out and see the world. And, I was interested in the martial arts. I'd been doing karate for a number of years and decided to come over here. I'd done a year of Japanese in college before I graduated a year early from college, just because I wanted to get out early and again, see the world. And so I ended up heading over here. Got a job at the first eikaiwa. There was a Nova that took me.
Wow!
Yeah, so I was part of that empire back in the day, and so I stayed with them for about a year. And fortunately, the guy who was the manager where I worked was doing his master's program at Temple. They had a school in Fukuoka then, where I was first stationed, I guess. It makes it sound like a military thing, doesn't it? So I ended up going to the Temple campus there, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get through that program.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I was in Fukuoka when I first came to Japan as well.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I was placed in a little town called Izuka, which
no way.
Yeah.
That's where I was.
No, you're kidding me. That's insane because most Japanese people have never even heard of Izuka. Nope. The only thing they know about it is so Prime Minister Aso was from Izuka, and his whole family is all super connected. They had like Aso supermarkets and stuff.
Yep.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
My karate dojo down there, they were doing an event, and he was asked, my teacher was asked to provide some cultural entertainment, and I ended up going and rubbing elbows with him at one point. So I met Aso Taro. It was like 2004-ish. So after Hakata, moved to Munakata, where I was teaching university at the University of Education there. So yeah.
Wow. So you moved on to the university thing very quickly. Was there anything that really motivated you to do that? Like for me, because sorry to cut you off, but me, I kind of was trying to find my feet in Japan. It took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to do. I kind of did the kindergarten teaching for a little while, and I really enjoyed that. And then I got into business once I got into Tokyo. I started looking at other things and the marketing work that I do now. But at the beginning, I was just trying to enjoy my time in Japan and figure out what I'm doing. But it seems like you went, into this the university thing full on. So what motivated you to do that, and how was that for you?
I mean, it's great. The reason I started it was actually just because the people who were doing the masters with me were all looking at university jobs, and they were looking to get university jobs, and so they were just offering them. I mean, people I knew who were working in university were like, "Hey, you want some part-time classes? All right, and now you're ready for full-time stuff." I was like, "What? Apply for this full-time job." And I had a young family at that point, and so when they were offering full-time positions, that the high schools that I was working at, even though I was actually working as a tannin at one point, they never granted me full-time employment.
Right.
They just kind of, it was a private high school, and they just kind of said, oh yeah, well, you'll be full-time someday. But there were all sorts of things. I don't really know what was going on at the time behind the scenes,
Right.
but yeah, they didn't offer.
Right. So from what I understand with that is one of the reasons why a lot of schools don't offer full-time employment is because it's incredibly expensive for them and there's a lot of risk. Yeah. So if you like start, being a terrible teacher and you just kind of give up on doing your job, it's incredibly difficult for them to fire you, which is why we have this kind of like musical chairs of, every few years everyone gets up and then they all switch universities and they sit back down again.
Yeah, the contract musical chairs, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I know have played that, and lucky ones have been able to find more permanent things. But yeah, I'm very familiar with that situation. In the high schools, less so. Most of the people I knew who were in high schools, they just ended up either being permanent at the high school level, and I could have ended up being a permanent junior high school teacher, but that was frustrating in its own way, and that had its own difficulties. And the university offered me a slightly better quick advancement potential, so it was good.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing now.
Okay, well, right now I'm working in elementary schools. I've been researching and doing work with elementary schools, I mean, as a teacher since 2005. Elementary, junior high school was my ALT work, and then when I moved up to university, I had done a little bit of high school, but not that much. And so I wanted to continue with that. And I got hired on to do elementary school English and to help train elementary school teachers at the University of Education that I was teaching at. And so the research that I do has, up until now, has all been on how do we create a good classroom environment for kids? How do we make something that kids will enjoy and they'll want to be there? And it's kind of fun, but it's also meaningful. It has to get towards that meaningful, because a lot of teachers at the time when they were first introducing elementary English were just like, oh, we'll just play games with them. And I looked at that and I was like, oh, whoa, like, slow down there. You can't just play games. That's a recipe for disaster. And so I watched a lot of classes, and watched a lot of teachers who were just like, oh God, please stop that. And watching students who reacted with that. And the example I give is one of these teachers who was famous for we'll just play games with them. He would do things like a bingo game that lasted 45 minutes. And he tried to make, bingo into an activity that you could do for 45 minutes. And so I think I saw that, and I saw a lot of the untrained teachers doing it this way. And they were looking at like, oh, well, we'll just play a game. And it's like, well, it has to go somewhere.
Right. Are these mostly, sorry to cut you off, are these mostly teachers, like foreign teachers who have come to Japan without teacher training? Or is it Japanese teachers who have teacher training?
It was both.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
And, there were some, and there were even some teachers who were trained in other subjects who kind of had this, there was an indoctrination. It was kind of a weird thing around 2010-ish, 2009, 2010, where they were first coming out with the changes in the elementary course of study. And it was very, very frustrating to watch, because so when I had been doing it, there was at least a willingness on the part of the teachers to be like, okay, we'll try some things. And then they came out with this curriculum, and everybody kind of stepped back and was like, oh, it's a curriculum. Oh, we got to, oh, okay, well, it just says games. All right, we'll play.
Oh, wow.
And so there was a sudden back cycling, and it was very frustrating. But we finally kind of reached a better footing. So the main grounds that I was working with in elementary schools was trying to do motivation. And so how do we motivate kids? How do we get them engaged with learning? And I view motivation and engagement as entirely linked. The things we do, the things we start to do, we start to like. And it's not really the other way around. It's not we start to like it and then we start to do it. It's the normalization. And I tend to take the idea that if you start doing it and it becomes something that you are used to doing, that you have done before and didn't do too badly at, didn't feel terrible at, then you're probably going to do it again. And the more we can do that in elementary schools, the more that we can create that kind of doing it feeling, the way the sense that students are kind of constantly active. And that's what I really try to build. I use the lessons from that, from observing both the bad and the good classes, and taking those lessons and kind of distilling them and trying to then turn them into teacher training programs that I'm working on now. And so what I've been working on more recently is more content driven. It's more on the literacy development. And so trying to figure out a way to get proper literacy development, training for sound letter connections, especially in elementary school teaching. Because from what I can see, that's one of the biggest areas of weakness with many Japanese speakers.
Right. And I've experienced this as well. Like I taught as an ALT at a junior high school for a while. And as a lot of ALTs will know, you get placed sometimes into an elementary school when, especially during like test weeks and things like that. And I remember that the expectations at different elementary schools were so vastly different. One elementary school would be like, okay, well, you know, we're just going to do this, and you just have to be there and kind of like play these games with them and say the words and stuff. And then the other schools had some real educational goals for these kids. They're like, no, we've done this, and we're building on their knowledge. And that difference, even within the same city, where they're both public schools and they're both receiving public funding, it was really surprising to me how much some teachers took it really seriously and some just didn't care, you know, or they just wanted to get it done.
Exactly. And, you know, and going with the Japanese system, every 6 years they're rotated. And so one school will lose their program leader and take all of the institutional memory that they had developed with that school, and it's just gone to a different school. And now that school has a program that is focused and working, and the other school just has a bunch of materials that this person happened to make and left behind.
Yeah, they're like trying to, it's like an archaeological dig, trying to figure out like, what did this all mean? Like, and they've all things like cards and things.
We've got a room full of teaching materials that with lesson plans and everything laid out clearly, but we don't really know how to read it. It's like, well, it's a lesson plan.
Oh wow!
But we're not going to do that. You know, they left that behind. It's like,
hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying the conversation, and I just want to take a quick moment to mention that this podcast is only possible because of the support of JobsinJapan.com. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com. There are tons of jobs on there, not only in English teaching, but also software engineering, hospitality, marketing and consulting, among many others. Most of the jobs on the board do not require any specific level of Japanese, and you can get started in minutes. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com, and let's get back to the conversation.
Well, I wonder how much this is affected by sort of the digitization of this, especially during COVID, you know, because when we went online, when I was teaching a couple of years ago at the high school, we kind of built a lot of this stuff from scratch. But once we made it, it was there, it was ready. And I think any teacher could come in and just look at it, and it's all really well laid out in a Dropbox. So how has that affected your work and the work you're doing with these elementary schools?
Basically, the work that I was doing during COVID, it just all went on hiatus. I couldn't get in schools. I couldn't do the observations that I'd been used to. I couldn't do the training that I was used to doing. And so it's been basically, like you're saying, a start from scratch, redo everything, start working with people in different ways, and start trying to build new materials and new ways to do it. And so thinking about how to do that. Yeah. And what I've seen, the teachers right now, the ones that I've been working with, they have been, you know, amazingly professional. And I will say this, that the teachers that I'm meeting and dealing with now are, they've had, you know, 10 years of practice and training since the beginning of this, and they've built up a really, really good sense of institutional memory. And
Mm-hmm.
it started to go throughout the system. And as they've been moved around, people are getting, they're kind of looking back at those materials that you're talking about, looking
Mm-hmm.
at what everything is. And it's like, oh, there is actually a curriculum here. Some of it's going to change when we change textbooks from Weekend to New Horizon or whichever book that they happen to be using. But the core of it really doesn't change that much. So there does seem to be some continuity, rather.
Yeah. So for the teachers in the audience, what are some of the really positive changes, especially with digital, that teachers can make? So especially untrained teachers, because I remember being an untrained teacher and not really knowing what I was doing a lot of the time. And I wonder, like, what are some of the things that they can take on that would be like easy, big wins that they can use?
Okay. The biggest things that I can advocate for you is add more small pieces to your lessons. The most successful classes that I have ever seen are basically just a series of routines with very, very little extra added on as it goes through. And so just little pieces changed here, little pieces added, and new knowledge that's been brought in. And so the more you can kind of create almost a script that might change seasonally for your class, but kind of a PowerPoint that you can just kind of drop in and play and then have it go, and have a script that you use. It can be one you develop, it can be one developed by somebody else, but if it works for you, that's really the way that I phrase it. But scripting your lessons, and really down to instructions, down to, everybody, we're going to have group 1, group 2, go. Okay, this line, and figuring out those gestures, figuring out all of that, so that there's a whole lot of continuity throughout your whole teaching. So that kind of material creation, where you script a lot of small activities that are very, very short, that seems to be the best way to go for if you're teaching.
Right. I think we did that quite a lot at the high school as well, where we had and some of the most you actually notice how impactful they are, as opposed to kind of guessing and wondering, like, was that helpful for the students, or was that actually doing something positive? So a good example that we had was we had this timed reading practice, and essentially what it was we took 4 of the same book and laminated the pages, and it was a book that was about basically it was what are they called? Graded readers. So we had graded readers, and we would give them to groups of students. They would read one each day, not each day, but maybe like 3 times a week. And they would chart their progress, how quickly they read it. We would give them this chart that would say how many words per minute it was reading the thing. And by the time they got to the end of the year, they could see on their chart how much quicker they were reading. Their numbers would go up from their reading speed being sort of like 50 words per minute to being like 120 words a minute by the end of the year, like literally more than doubling their reading speed. And they can see the progress, and you can see the progress.
Yeah. Data visualization of that sort is phenomenally powerful. And anything that you can do to track progress in a way that's going to make students realize that there's growth happening, I would say that that's huge. So bringing those things in, also excellent. So short activities like that, great. I love it.
Right. What are some things that untrained teachers can learn that they wouldn't necessarily have to get training for? Because I was an untrained teacher, but I end up getting a TEFL qualification and learning a lot about it on my own time. But a lot of teachers maybe either don't have time for that, or they just got to Japan and they're trying to sort of survive a chaotic classroom. What are some things that they can do to become better teachers and maybe at least feel like they're actually doing a better job?
The first thing that I would say for me, as an immigrant to Japan, is just spend the time learning the language and spend the time interacting in the language as much as you can. For the ALTs in the crowd, if you're getting out there and if they're allowing it right now, having lunch with the kids, it's phenomenal. spending time interacting with them, even in kind of, what we'd say in Japanese, miburi teburi, and just kind of, gestures, getting through it as best you can. But, kids are phenomenally forgiving when people don't understand them. And that's the great thing. So for elementary, especially, the more time you can spend with them, if you've got the energy to do it, please do that. That's going to give you a better understanding of what the kids are going through when they go into a classroom and perhaps they don't, you don't speak their language, they don't really speak your language, and so communication can't happen. But finding ways to make that communication happen in useful and easy ways, and then picking up what you can. So the better appreciation that the teachers have for the language learning process, I think that's for a beginning teacher, that's a huge one.
Yeah, it kind of gives you an insight as well into what the students might be going through, because you are picking up a language for the first time and they're doing the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of those things, but it's really, teaching always first, second, and third, it comes down to a relationship. Do you have a relationship with the people in your classroom? This is why so many people struggle with the online learning and the online teaching, is that it's really hard to build a relationship with somebody who you don't exist in the same physical space. Even within a digital space, you can kind of communicate, but until kids really get to that, that Piagetian abstract concepts phase of processing things, they just really can't understand that there's another person, that person on the TV is a real person. Like if you've ever seen kids see a famous person in person, they it shocks them when they see them, or if you're right now you're interacting with parents via Zoom or Skype, from back when, or FaceTime, or however, then once they see the parent in life, it's like you exist, or the grandparent rather, you exist in real life. You're a person. There's a 4-year-olds will just look at you like, oh, it's FaceTime person, and that's I've heard multiple people say this now that we're existing only in this online realm. And that relationship, anything you can do to build a relationship with the kids, and to build a sense that there is a community in the classroom. With my university students, since I've been online, I've had them spend the last 5 minutes of class just writing a short message to somebody else in the class on the Zoom chat. So I just ask, say something nice to somebody else. It can be public, it can be private, it can just be thank you, but take a minute and say something meaningful to somebody else in this class, and let them know that you recognize that there is another person here. And that's been a small thing, but the students that I've talked to about it, they've said that was a really positive thing, especially when we were really locked down, when we weren't going out as much. And it's something that I've brought back into the classroom as well when I use my name card system. So
I also want to ask you about being a dad in Japan, because having mixed kids in Japan, and you've got 4 wonderful kids, which is a big family for Japan. You're doing your part to repopulate this country.
As a good friend of mine got for me when my 4th was born, he got me a T-shirt that said "Koken shita," which means I contributed.
That's really fun.
So I've unfortunately lost it since then in the move. But
what is it like? What is it like for you being a dad here? Because I think a lot of people don't realize how many little things you really have to figure out as a dad, whether it's looking after your kids at going to daycares, and even just talking to daycares, trying to figure out what happened that day or something, and they're trying to tell you, and maybe if you don't understand Japanese that well, it can be really a struggle. So what are some of the things that you have learned about being a dad in Japan that have been good or bad?
Well, I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier with being in Izuka and in the Chikuho area where I was, if you're not speaking Japanese, like you're just not getting by in that area. And so like living there was a great boot camp for me to get that skill. And so to be able to talk with the other parents and to do the PTA duties and, reading the Dendakucho and everything that they send home from school, all of that has been a huge part of that. And so language is a barrier. You're absolutely right, and it takes me twice as long to get through anything. And I could type it in on my computer and print it out and give it to them, but if I have to write it out, I'm always like, okay, what's that? Is that this stroke or that? It's such a long process,
right?
And so that's that you bring that up. That's a huge part of it, the language. And raising my kids bilingually has been a big thing, and figuring out ways that I can maintain the home language and the school language, the inside outside bilingual practice that we're doing. That's what my wife and I are trying to achieve. We want our kids to be both linguistically and culturally fluent in both places, and they can handle it. So we've been fortunate that that the schools that we've been at haven't been too pushy about silly rules like hair color, because my kids are very not black haired. And it would there would be choice words if I had to dye their hair every couple of weeks. But we fortunately haven't had to do that. The public schools have been pretty accepting, and the schools in Fukuoka were okay, and the schools here in Tokyo have been pretty good. We've been lucky overall. And aside from my oldest son, who's in junior high school now, losing points on his test for not answering in the exact way that he is supposed to on his English test, question.
Even though his English is probably better than the teacher's.
Right. Well, I'm not gonna say it's better than the teacher, but the question is something like, will you work hard this semester? And his answer is, I will try. And he loses points because the teacher says, first you have to say yes or no. So like he's lost half a point or a point there. Wow. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's minor frustration, but he brings those tests home and I look at them and we both kind of laugh.
And you just laugh, yeah. That's the only way to deal with that without getting stressed out.
Exactly. There's nothing. Well, and what does stressing out about it give you? But yeah, beyond that, just of course, the daily worries that all parents have about, safety and whatnot. But I don't have excessive worries being a parent here in Japan. My kids are never more than a kilometer from home, and it's a pretty reasonably safe area. It's nice, right. And we've been very fortunate. I come back to that. I've been lucky. I've been lucky to be doing what I do and to live where I live.
Fantastic. Quint, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been really interesting. There's a lot of really great stuff in there. Where can people find out more about you if they want, or more about the work that you do if they wanted to find out?
So you can look me up on my website. I have a website. It's a little bit out of date, but the website is quint.space. It's just my name .space.
Nice.
I went with that one. And so if you'd like to ask questions or just talk about research and what's going on in elementary school and motivational science in Japan, I'm open to talk.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.